The prophetic destiny of Canada is, I believe, extraordinary. And I just want to say some of the prophetic words that have been spoken over Canada. One of them is from David Young Cho, who is a phenomenal man of prayer and prophecy from South Korea, Seoul, Korea. And he prophesied years ago, in 1975 as a matter of fact, when he came to Canada, because he had been praying and saying, God, what country will you raise up in the last days? Like, what country, Lord, if you're going to favor, or you're going to come, or you're going to move to really lead the world in many things? And the Lord spoke to him as he set foot on the land in Canada. And the Lord said, this country, Canada, is going to emerge even in the last days as a nation that is known for their passion in the bridal paradigm. Canada is going to emerge as a nation also economically, even to be kind of a bread basket for the rest of the world. And you know, that's repeated by somebody like Cindy Jacobs, who really prophesied about Canada being economically blessed, even in natural resources, that there's been so much untapped natural resources in Canada that Canada was going to be economically a great blessing and to be mightily used of the Lord. I think that's been tested in Canada in the last years, that there's been much trial that Canada has gone through. But I do hold a hope and definitely a promise from the Lord that Canada will arise again, and Canada will lead the world in many of the things that God has spoken about, the bridegroom paradigm, about loving Jesus, about the call of prayer, the call to be, again, innovators and an economic blessing to the world. I do believe the Lord is emerging the First Nations people of Canada. There's been much prophecy about the First Nations people, that they will take prominence in leadership. Even now, we saw a major national gathering in the 70th anniversary of the Battleford, North Battleford revival, or the Latter Rain revival. We saw a lot of leadership coming from, predominantly the leadership was coming from First Nations people. As you know, there's been much prayer in Canada for the First Nations people. There's much, you know, gatekeeper anointing that's on the First Nations people. Even right now, those in Canada reading the news about how there's a First Nations woman who is standing for truth in Parliament, you know, speaking and revealing things that have not been right. She's a First Nations woman. So God is touching the First Nations people. There's been many prophecies about the First Nations people emerging in Canada as leaders, as ones of righteousness, as holiness is going to sweep, revival is going to sweep some of the northern communities, the First Nations communities. Some of that has happened already, definitely. Well, there's been great gains in souls being saved amongst the First Nations community. I believe there's going to be much more. And that, again, Canada has a call for economic breadbasket. The wheat fields of the prairies to the oil fields of Western Canada, that the Lord, I believe, is going to prosper Canada as we see these natural resources come forth, that we are not to be borrowers all the time of other nations. We're to be lenders. And I believe that that's happening and is about to come to another scale. And soul winning, you know, that God is really raising up the many to turn. Canada is like a womb that many nations have come. They've come from other false religions as well. But there's been many prophecies about them coming to be born again in the womb of Canada, to know the birthing in the Spirit, the true God. And so that has happened in part, but there will be much more of it to come. I will say this as coming from Toronto, that we've seen so many Iranian, Persian people come to Jesus. It's like a sweeping revival in Toronto right now of the Persian people, you know, that they've radically getting saved. They're coming to Canada and coming to Jesus, or they're getting on the internet or Skype or FaceTime with relatives back in Iran and telling them about Jesus, and they're getting saved. Indeed, the hotbed for revival right now per capita is the Persian people. But we're seeing Canada being a womb, that these many are moving here and coming to salvation. So I believe that's only going to be a domino effect and multiplied. And Eastern Canada as well, you know, just waking up out of any sort of slumber. So Cindy Jacobs, Patricia King, Stacey Campbell, David Young Cho, many prophetic voices have said a similar thing, that Canada in the last days will arise as a leader amongst the nations of the earth, including economically, and including in a love and passion for Jesus. So I believe that.